First of all, thank you for joining us today for our webinar, 6 Deadly Sins of Sales Communications. My name is Sarah, and I'm on the content team here at Qwilr, and I'll be hosting today's webinar. We also have 3 distinguished panelists with us today, and I'd like to go ahead and introduce them. And I've asked them to also talk a little bit about the companies that they're with, because not that it's a sales pitch, but I just want you to understand the frame of reference and their perspective that they'll be sharing today. So first off, I'll go in the order that I see you on Zoom. So Mckeown from Dooley, Head of Growth at Dooley. Mike, welcome. Please tell us, yeah, glad to have you today. Calling in from Austin, Texas, I believe.
It is, right in the center of Texas.
All right, awesome. Well, welcome. Would you please share a few words about Dooley with us?
Thanks for having me, and to all the Aussies and Kiwis, good morning. Thanks for joining us today. You know, I've been hard pressed to ever find a rep that loves to actually work out of Salesforce. It's very slow. All your fields are in a different place, and your sales manager is constantly pinging you all day. And so we created something at Dooley called, we say, a Connected Workspace, fancy marketing term, but essentially that just means a place for your frontline managers and your reps to work on deals together. It's a better place for that. And so it's super easy as a rep for you to update Salesforce. So whether it's your pipeline or taking really good account notes, and everything syncs to Salesforce in the background. And so you do not have to see Salesforce ugh-mug all day if you don't want to. We have a completely free trial. Check us out, dooley.ai, and start winning more deals together, all together as a team.
That's great. Thanks, Mike, and welcome. I do want to point out too, at the end of this webinar, we will have an exit survey, and you'll have the option to check if you want more information from one of our panelist companies today. So you'll have the option to get more information from Dooley or from Mixmax or from Qwilr when you exit this webinar. Okay, next up, I'd like to introduce Kyle Parrish, the VP of Sales at Mixmax. So Kyle, you're no stranger to our webinars. We're delighted to have you back. Welcome. Please introduce yourself and Mixmax to us.
Yeah, I'm super excited to be back. I love these things. If you've ever heard me speak on a webinar, you know that I get very impassioned about talking about this kind of stuff. And Mark and I like to play it back and forth on that. So he's always a good sparring partner. In case you don't know what Mixmax is a sales engagement software solution. And what that means is that we try to automate a lot of the manual tasks that salespeople, SDRs, AEs, even CSMs, revenue generating teams, that they perform on a daily basis. So we try to remove that busy work to make them more productive with their time, so they don't spend it on things like sending manual emails or scheduling manual calendar events or updating Salesforce. And so just like what Mike just said with Dooley, we automate a lot of those tasks that salespeople just shouldn't have to do in a manual fashion. And so that lets them spend more time on higher value activities like selling or customer success.
Excellent. Thank you. Always glad to have you back. All right. And finally, our third panelist, Mark Tanner, who is the co-founder and COO of Qwilr. So Mark, welcome. Would you please tell us a little bit about Qwilr?
Sure thing. Thank you, Sarah, and thrilled to be here. So Qwilr, look, there's a few themes sort of echoing throughout these companies. You can sort of see where we've clustered them together. But I think, again, you know, the core idea behind Qwilr is really, I mean, the core meta idea is that files suck in the age of the web, and we should all be living in a sort of post-file world. Really, Qwilr's core focus is around sales collateral. And so how do you get those proposals, quotes, pitch decks, presentations out to your customers quickly? How do you automate that process? How do you make sure it's always on brand? How do you have like interesting sales intelligence? Like, are my leads actually opening these? What sections are they looking at? How do you make it easy for your buyer to engage with that? So you're able to sort of say, hey, you know, I want the gold package and I want this many of that. And I do want this optional extra and not that one. And then be able to quickly sort of, in a sort of somewhat a semi-self-serve way, adjust their pricing, understand what they're getting, accept, sign, pay, and then have that sync up with tools like Salesforce. You can link in your Mixmax. You can do all sorts of other interesting things like that, and make sure it's actually part of that constellation of SaaS tools that runs your business. Again, I think to the theme of everybody else on this call, removing a lot of busy work, making sure that your customer has a truly excellent experience and you're able to sort of fully track and understand what's going on in the sales process. Finn.
Perfect. Thank you, Mark. And thank you, Mike. And thank you, Kyle. So obviously we have 3 well-seasoned sales leaders here with us, and all from SaaS companies. And of course, we are here to talk about the deadly sins of sales communications, because so often, you think you've got a great prospect going, and then all of a sudden they go dark. Something has happened, and it could be, maybe it's something that you've done, or maybe, something that's going on behind the scenes. And so we're here to kind of talk about what are some of those common things that we've seen throughout our careers that maybe you could be shooting yourself in the foot, so to speak. So the rules are I'm going to share with you our sins, and then our panelists are going to debate them, but really there are no rules. So we encourage you to chat in if you disagree. We want to know that. If you think we're missing something, we want to know that too. Or if you have questions at any time, please chat it in. We'll catch it. We want you to be part of this conversation. We will also send out a link to the recording afterwards in case you want to review it or share it with your team. So those are kind of the rules, if you will, but really it's an informal discussion. We're all here to have fun and to share knowledge and help everyone get better at sales. So with that in mind, let me go ahead and share my screen again. And we're going to dive right into this. So we have sales communication sin number 1, spending too much time talking about your brand. I get pitched a lot, and I know that, whether it's in a conversation or it's sales materials, so often a sales rep will start off by saying, hey, we've been in business since 2014 and we have offices all over the world. You had my attention and now you just kind of lost it. There's a stat that said only 13% of buyers believe that a salesperson understands their needs. So I'm going to open it up to our panelists and say, what do you think about this sin? Do you agree with it? Or how do you advise your teams, especially if you're in the SaaS world, and you need to build trust? How do you do that without boring your prospect or sounding like an egotistical jerk? So with that in mind, Kyle, I'm going to open it up and ask you, what do you think about this sin?
Oh boy, here we go, right out of the gate. I feel pretty strongly about this, and there's 2 ways to think about this. The first one is with sales prospecting. So something that Mixmax enables sales teams to do is prospecting through sequences and things like that. I think it's a gigantic mistake to lead with something about your company or yourself or your brand. Right? It's a much better idea to lead with something that's of value to them and the person that you're, specifically the person that you're trying to prospect to. And so make it about them and their problems, but don't make it worthless, right? Don't identify the fact that they went to UCLA or something like that if that's not relevant to what you're trying to talk to them about. The idea that they're going to respond to you if you give them something of value and why they should be interested in talking to you, your chances of them responding go way, way up. They just don't care about you and what you are trying to do. They care about their problems, and that's what's going to get them in the door. The other thing to think about, and then I'll turn it over to the others to talk about this too, because I don't want to take up all the limelight here, is when you do engage with a customer, there is a balancing act that you have to get into of delivering some sort of trust or social proof or something that says that other companies like you have trusted us and here's why you should too. So it's not always all about them only. You do have to have some social proof there, and I'll let others expand on that if they like.
You've just stolen my thunder there, mate. I was just going to come in and disagree with you. I think that there are important times to talk about your brand is maybe not quite the right word, but I think there are important times to try to be, and I think this is perhaps especially true for startups where, you're sort of up against an established player and no one was fired for buying IBM or whatever sort of other incumbent you would talk about. But I think you do want to have a moment where you say, hey, maybe we do have offices around the world and we can offer 24/7 support, and we can, we do have all these large corporates who use us, and we are whatever SOC 2 compliant or blah, blah, blah. but it ain't up top. Like that's when you're getting close to the close and you're in like objection handling sort of position, or maybe slightly earlier than then, but like it's not anywhere up top. I think at the start, I think everyone in sales talks about this, and it can be a bit of a trope, but it's like, curiosity and openness to understand, like, and empathize about, like, what are they going through? What are their problems? And try to sort of, how do you relatively quickly get into a meaningful conversation around that is like, that's the magic. And I think, how do you sort of get on that side? And I think the easiest way, or one of the easiest ways to sort of turn that off is to be this, like, you're on this first call and someone loads up a deck and it's like, let me talk you through this script that some like junior PMM put together 3 years ago. And it's like a complete nightmare. Sorry, I'll shut up there, Mike.
Yeah, Mike, you actually took it right where I was hoping as well. Is like, I would say is bold enough. If you don't come from like a blue chip, really established company, do not use a deck on your discovery call at all. And I think the way you should really think about things is in really open questions versus statements. If you're just rattling off things to them, you're not having open dialogue. You should ask them, how much do you know about our company? What have you heard before? And then start that conversation instead of just start blurbing at them what you think that they care about, what they know. Because at the end of the day, you're going to learn a lot more asking those open discovery questions at that step.
Yeah, good point. And Mia is chatting in, wow, no deck. So how does that work for you? Or do you want to elaborate a little bit more on that?
So I actually came from Gong, and Gong just kind of sits on a wealth of data. And they, Devin Reed and that team did a really, they analyzed like hundreds of thousands of sales calls and emails. And what they found at that kind of discovery stage is you actually reduce your chance of getting a follow-up meeting by 17% as a correlative stat if you introduce a deck during that discovery call phase. And so, backed up by data, the likelihood that you're going to book another meeting when you use a deck, if you're not one of those huge established companies, is not very good.
Yeah.
I'll give you another perspective on that. Is as soon as you open up a deck, the respondent says, okay, I'm being presented to, I can just shut down. But if there's no deck, you have to carry the conversation back and forth. And that is an expectation of ask and answer questions, and we're going to have a conversation instead of, I've got these 5 slides I've got to get through, I'm going to present to you. You can just sit back and wait for me to be done.
Yeah, I mean, I think to attempt to mildly be contrarian here, like there are moments where in a call, someone you actually, through a discovery call, you actually get to some sort of nugget of truth, and you might want to be like, hey, let me quickly show you something. And okay, it's fine to bring up slide 4 and just, go into a thing, or like if you're really brave, you can throw into a demo or something like that. But I think really, again, that's not the point. Like if you've got something actually what's your goal in that discovery call? Understand them, build some rapport, understand their problem, and frankly, like book the next meeting, like book time for a deeper discovery. And if you start to if you can use those tools as a tool to well, let me show you this one thing. I'd love to give you a full demo of this. Do you actually have time for that sort of next sort of deeper dive? And I think, that sort of little bit of a taste can sometimes be useful. But I think, really, again, as always, come back to the old sort of classic, what is your goal for the call? At every sort of stage, what is your goal here? Where are you trying to move this to? How are you sort of trying to move it forward? And I think that, there's lots of little things here, but keeping someone engaged, energized, open, positive, can be a very powerful thing. And I think decks definitely detract from that, as do, frankly, anything else that just is you reading from a blurb or a script or other things in that early stage where you're sort of, again, whether that's talking about your brand or just other sort of generic parts, you're not being open, you're not running with it. And that's a thing that can be a security blanket. We train a lot of people in SDR land to be pretty script heavy. And then you come into AE land and you're like, blanket removed, go and have an open conversation with someone. And, but it's critical. It's critical to be able to sort of do that and have it feel natural and normal and not like you're asking them 7 discovery questions you have lined up there nicely and duly ready to go.
On the flip though, I think Nikki in the comments has her approach is she actually sends kind of opens up a deck about what she knows about the company. Now I think customized research about the prospect or the company that can be powerful in that kind of presentation, 1 to 2 slides where you're like, hey, I've seen that you've grown your headcount by 17%. I know you have an aggressive goal of 3xing your revenue. Those kind of things will speak to your end buyer if you're talking about them. But what we're talking about is just like verbal garbage about just talking about how great your company is from a deck perspective. That's really where you see those decrease kind of next steps in the discovery call.
Yeah, I just noticed that Nikki sent that just to the hosts and panelists. But what Nikki said was she creates a deck that is what she knows about the prospect. That is phenomenal sales practice, right? That shows you've done your research. You're coming into this without having to ask basic questions. And it gives them the opportunity to say, yes, you got it right, or no, you didn't, or to expand on things that are important to the conversation. Kudos. I think that's great.
And to the theme here, that's not a deck about your brand. That's a deck about their brand. And I think, so there's actually just a quick one before you run on. Matt had a good question, which is also just to hosts and panelists, which is, I work at a startup with an impressive set of strategic investors that are very relevant to my industry. Do you think it's effective to mention these investors? I think investors are a real double-edged sword. Like, I think they can be very powerful in certain situations and can really be a massive turnoff in others. So like as an example, like, so like if you're in tech and you're sort of talking about, oh, we had like so-and-so invested enough. If you're pitching a founder who just had like that investor turn them down, or like had a bad experience with that investor, or thinks that investor has like a bro-y culture or whatever else, like that might be like a turn off and be like, actually, I'm not interested in that sort of thing. Now, like, again, like on the flip side, it can give credibility. If you say, hey, we're small, but we just got invested in by Sequoia, like, okay, like that's not bad. So I think it's not a slam dunk, Matt, I suppose. It's just, and I would sort of think about it and sort of be a little bit careful with it, and definitely not put it up front. And maybe it's more of one that, again, you use a little bit later on when if you feel like you need to build more trust and credibility, as you sort of head towards the close.
That's good. Okay, so to summarize, I think we do all agree that make it more about the buyer, not so much about your brand, especially those non-relevant things, but rather question the buyer about what they know about your brand is a more effective tactic. We could spend all day talking about this one sin, but I do want to get to the second sin. So with that in mind, our second sin is no follow-up plan during discovery. We have the stat here, 80% of deals won required 5 follow-up calls after the meeting. I do have a poll here as well on if you are using or if you are booking discovery. So let me launch that. So the poll is, do you book your next meeting during your discovery call? Yes, no. There's no judgment here. We just want to know where you're at. So please take a moment to vote. Good, we got a lot of votes coming in. This is great. And it's not a slam dunk here. So just take a quick moment to let us know where you're at, and then I will share the poll. Again, no judgment here. Okay. All right, closing the poll in 3, 2, 1. All right, and can you all see the results there? All right, so 71% of you said yes, you are booking, okay, and 29% said no, you are not. All right, so I'm going to ask our panelists, weigh in on this one. What's best practices here? What do you recommend?
So Sarah, you said no judgment here, but I'm afraid to say there's some judgment here. No. I mean, I am. The goal of a discovery call is to book another call, or to book. I mean, that's not entirely true. Like there are instances where you wouldn't want to do that. But I mean, genuinely, in a more generic sense, like if you're sort of trying to understand the customer, you're trying to sort of move it forward. Like again, the zone you want to get to is to have another conversation with them. And so I would say that if you can bring that in there, especially like if you've got them there, you can say, hey, do you want to open your calendar? Let's find a time. Like no doubt there are like wonderful tools like Mixmax out there that can help in other sort of meetings if you want to do it over email later, if you have to do it over email later, but like in the moment, like you have them there, you're both talking, you've built some rapport, you've got them engaged. Really that's almost always, certainly at Qwilr, one of the core goals of a discovery call is, and any call, frankly, is to book the next call. And so I think if you can get that into your practice, to the 25% of you who aren't doing that currently, I think that could be a huge win, like a really sort of easy, like low-hanging fruit that you could like meaningfully improve on that side.
Yeah, no time like the present. If you've got them on the call, spend a minute and a half trying to book the next call. If you can't do it, if calendars don't work out, at least you tried. Get a time frame from them. But just like Mark said, there's all sorts of reasons why you wouldn't necessarily book the next call, actually. If it's a bad fit for your product, by all means, walk away. That should be the actual point of discovery, is to identify whether or not this is a winnable opportunity. And if it's not, if this is both multi-directional, actually, if it's worth you trying to pursue them, or if it's worth them being interested in taking another call with you. So you have to define that on discovery. And if it's not, don't be afraid to walk away. So much time is wasted. Sales time, product time, engineering time is wasted on trying to chase deals that aren't a perfect fit for the product. So I'm a huge believer in discovery. And I think the original sin was about discovery. The deal is won or lost in discovery. If you can find a good pain, we'll talk about quantification in a little bit. If you can find a good pain that you can quantify, a real business problem in discovery, that's the deal. That's what you're going to sell to. You're not going to sell your product widgets and buttons and knobs and levers. You're going to sell them on a solution to a problem that they're having. You find that out in discovery. You don't do that on the demo.
And I would say time does kill deals. And so with these, like if you're not selling enterprise level software and someone gives you a soft commit, like follow up in 3 months, that's not really an opportunity at the end of the day. And so the other thing I wanted to kind of bring up there is, like, from a buyer perspective, I'm a technology owner. I have people outbounding me all the time, and I might get a little bit curious, but while on the call, it's very hard to pin my time down. I have to be protective of my time. And so if they're not getting enough in that discovery call, or they're not asking me for next steps, I'm going to go heads down on the next thing, or I might give you a soft follow back in 3 months. But the reality is, I just don't think it's important enough. And so really, it's going back to that discovery question. Did you ask the open questions? Did you find pain? And then holding me accountable while I'm there. Like, you should respect your time. That doesn't mean you have to be overly aggressive, but hey, I have my calendar up. We talked about this pain point for you. When's the next time can we kind of check in? And you're going to progress that. Nothing kills deals more than just staying in a particular stage. It looks like fake pipeline for you, and it's not a real committed pipeline. And so you want to get that out of there as quick as possible, and really make sure you're spending your time on people who are interested and have a pain point.
So you mentioned, Mike, those people that say, well, call me again in 3 months. What do you do in that scenario?
Backstage, when we were all meeting, Kyle had a fantastic answer there. So it's something I've struggled with, talked to sales leaders about, but I think Kyle had some really good perspective to his frontline reps.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I say blow up the deal right then and there. My response to that is, generally when I hear call me back in 3 months, it's a no. I would rather just hear the no right now and not have to bother you, and not have this, just like Mike said, this phantom pipeline sitting there that is never going to go anywhere. And so I would actually challenge to find out if it's a real, genuine objective. Hey, we've got 3 other projects going on right now. I just don't have room for this right now. I really am interested. Call me in 3 months when our backlog opens up a little bit. Okay, that's legitimate, I think. Then I would go back to, how big of a problem is this? Because if you're telling me it's $1 million problem, I should stop doing this with bad math. I'll do it with easier math. If you're telling me it's a $1.2 million problem, that's $100,000 every month. You're wasting $300,000 by telling me to push this back 3 months. If it's that big of a problem and you can get them to commit to that. That's about quantification. We'll talk about that in a second.
All right. So I think we do agree on this one, that no follow-up during discovery is truly a sin. So that's something that we want to move away from. But let's move on to the third sin. So Kyle, you already alluded to it, but failure to quantify the buyer's problem and or your solution. So 74% of buyers choose to work with brands who demonstrate value. But at the same time, I know that there's a little bit of discussion and chatter in the sales world about this particular sin. So I want to poll the audience here, that is assuming I can find my polls on my screens, and launch the poll about, do you use ROI in your discussion points? So here we go. So do you quantify your solution or present ROI to your prospect? Vote yes or no. Or are you not sure how to do that? It's not cut and dry. And again, I will tell you, our panelists are not all, they don't all agree on this one. So there's no shame in voting any way you want. We just want to hear where you are at. So please take a moment, vote now. Just a couple more seconds on this one. All right. Closing it in 3, 2, 1. And good. I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So let's see, 60% of you said yes, you are discussing ROI, 18% no, and 22% said I'm not sure how. So thank you for your honesty there. Really appreciate that. But now I want to open it up to the panelists and talk to us about this one. Like I said, I don't think that we're all in agreement on how do we approach this. Do you talk about ROI? Do you not? Kyle?
Mark, I was going to give the floor to Mark on this one first.
Well, I mean, I think so. I think I think the contrarian amongst us is Mike, perhaps. But look, so I think the ROI. So look, trying to understand. So there's, like everything in life, it's a spectrum, right? There's a whole bunch of space in here. I think if you're not understanding your buyer's problem and like putting some degree of quantification against it, I do think it can be hard sometimes to sort of make it through to the close. You sort of want to understand like what is the challenge here? What's the pain point? What is the impact this could have? If it is clean enough, like the ideal, easy like situation that Carl described is like, this is costing you 1.2 million a year, therefore $100,000 a month, therefore whatever, $3,000 a day. And our solution is only $1,000 a day, and therefore QED, you're going to make all this money and we're going to make money, and both of us, it's a win-win and blah, blah, blah. Now, I think like it's not necessarily always as sort of clean and perfect as that, but I think should you attempt to go on a journey towards there, I think that's the right way to go in a lot of instances where you can sort of try to sort of quantify it. And I think allowing a space for that sort of communication to happen, sort of try to understand back and forth. And I think, what the ROI actually looks like. Side note, Qwilr has a very fun little ROI calculator you can sort of add some parameters to and play around with, and it sort of allows your buyer to sort of, play around with a few drag and drops and sort of try to measure value. The issue is, well, no, I'm not gonna get to the issue. I actually want Mike to come in here and like dunk on me, but I think like that, there is an issue around, I think it can be a double-edged sword. I think there can be a lot of assumptions that go into what make this. And I think you can put yourself in a position where if you make a bunch of assumptions that are wrong, you can look like an idiot and kind of actually talk yourself out of a deal in some ways. Anyway, so I'll be quiet. I've got more to say, but I'll be quiet for now.
I wouldn't say I'm full contrarian here. I think there's a time and place for all of these things. And the reason we're sitting here when we talk about deadly sins is because all of our glass houses have been broken at some point in time, right? And we're all learning from that. But I think the big thing here is, yes, from my opinion, on quantifying the actual buyer's problem. And that doesn't always have to be a dollar amount. It could be more on kind of a pain thermometer of like how it's affecting their entire team. I think where you get a little bit more nuance is when you start talking about your solution's ROI. And it's less about, you could have a great methodology, but sometimes they're a little less trusted, because I think we've all seen those standard ROI calculators that don't have really good custom inputs, and it balloons the number like, hey, you're going to save yourself $1 million this year. And then you're kind of like, that couldn't be the actual case. But I will say this, I think ROI framing is a must when you have a CFO as the end decision, person who has got to sign off on a contract. a lot of times those VP level or those CFO levels, they need that kind of business justification, and you need to help your prospect kind of put that together. So I think my nuance there is it's usually not as much on the end buyer, but it is for that person who's going to sign on that contract. Helpful.
Good. We have Sam chatting in. When do you discuss it? Is it during discovery? Is it during demo? Or when do you raise the question of ROI?
This is where I start to get really impassionate. This will set you apart as a sales professional. Do this right, and your customers will be eating out of your hand, proverbially, hopefully.
I'm taking notes over here, Kyle. Let it rip.
This is the kind of thing where the best salespeople win deals, not the best product win deals. If you can come in and you can show an understanding of how your product improves your customers' daily life, their business metrics, things like that, if you can be the expert and the trusted advisor here, you will get to that next step. There's just no question in my mind, unless it's a bad fit for the product or it doesn't actually do what their problems are. But if you can come with some ideas about asking them some pointed questions and getting them to give you feedback and start to quantify those things to dollars. And by the way, Mike is absolutely right. It's not always dollars. Maybe it's time, but guess what? Time equals money. So you can make that correlation. These are the types of things that will make for a really solid business case when you get to that point. And somebody put in the chat here that ROI really is the business case. Quantification is, how big of a problem is this that we're talking about? Are we talking about a $50,000 problem and a $100,000 solution? Never going to happen. $1.2 million problem and a $50,000 solution, guess what? That's phenomenal ROI. And you don't call it ROI, you call it a $1.2 million problem that we're working to solve. That's the kind of nuanced difference there.
Great, great. Mark, did you want to add anything?
No, I think that a thing that we've been playing around with, to sort of to Michael's point, is having like in a bunch of our reps, when they're working larger deals. So we just closed like a pretty meaningful one with Thomson Reuters, and like I think on that side there were multiple stakeholders, multiple approvals coming through, and there was the rep put together an ROI sort of one pager basically, or like it's a little Qwilr doc, but with a few other links out to the proposal, links out to other things and whatever else. But like on that page it was sort of talking about like, during this conversation with your company, we've heard these problems, and like had a few pull quotes from praise be to Gong and Chorus for making all this easy, but like, had a few pull quotes, be able to sort of like, hey, this person said this, this sales leader said that, whatever, and sort of going through here, this has led us to sort of this thing, here's how we think about it, this is how Qwilr is going to solve this for you, blah, blah. And as that goes through shared services and, through, some sort of, VP level approver, or, through here, that's sort of a thing that'd be like, we've gone on this journey with you. Here's how we understand the problem. And like, obviously he shared that with the champion. The champion was like, I would edit this and change this a little bit. And, but like, I think that type of a thing, look, we do deals at Qwilr that are, whatever, for $5,000 a year. You're probably not putting in, all that effort for a deal like that. But when you're working on deals that are getting to, 50K or up from there, or even like, 25 or whatever, like, spending that time to sort of really fully clarify it, make sure that it is sort of, that there is something there. I think that can be really powerful.
Good. Okay, so to summarize, we do agree that it's important to quantify the buyer's problem and or your solution, but it needs to be meaningful. So don't use generic ROI calculators, but rather make it relevant, specific to your buyer and their use case. So good. Okay, let's move on to sin number 4. So sin number 4 is sending generic sales materials. We have a quote here from our own buyer experience study that we did last year. 64% of buyers look for personalized materials, and 25% of buyers will just dismiss generic collateral. So where you thought you might have had a foot in the door, you send them something generic and boom, you're out, without really getting a shot at this. So with that in mind, I want to ask our panelists, I know personalization and tailoring these materials, hugely time consuming. Everybody's platform here is about saving time. So talk to me, how do you coach your teams? How would you advise on this particular sin? Mike, let's start off with you.
This is a tough one, especially you have all this amazing product marketing collateral a lot of times, and you really want to put your best foot forward. But I think there's like two areas here. Is like, one, are the materials that you're adding going to benefit the conversation? And so instead of thinking about, something very generic that you send to everybody, a lot of the times your buyer will roll up into a couple of buckets. And so, for example, we sell to sales leaders, and so they care about, taking their green reps and making sure they're ramped quickly. They care about having a very clean look into their forecast because that affects the quota and who they're going to hire. And they care about things like being able to see all these deal blockers and be able to unblock them. Those are three common paths. And so it's okay to have a template structure. So if a rep, if you're on a call with somebody and they mention one of those three use cases, you could have a guiding template and then you can personalize it. So it doesn't always have to be custom from scratch, but I'd really lean in to make sure that, your email has one clear ask and any supporting collateral speaks to that ask that you really care about as well.
Good.
I mean, I think there's two types of personalization here. So there's the generic template, which is kind of like a brochure, and it's just like, dear potential customer, or whatever, right? And I think there's an obvious stuff, like if you're not doing the basics around having, pulling in that data from Salesforce or HubSpot or whatever, and just having it be personalized so that you've got their brand logo, you've got their, and you can automate a heap of this these days. You've got their, first name, last name, company name, sales rep company details, all that sort of stuff put into a template. I think that's important. I think the second level of personalization is we have had a conversation or a few conversations, and I actually listened to you and I understood something about it. And I am now presenting you a solution that is not just widget X plugs into, your thing. It's here is a, it's a description around something. It's not necessarily going to be, is it truly going to be a truly custom solution? No, we work in SaaS, but there is going to be, how you communicate that and how you sort of personalize it. And I think this is again where this is where real strong reps stand out, right? It's much easier to just press create from template, send out, and that's okay. But it's much, if you spend the 10, 15 minutes writing a thoughtful little intro to it, and then adding a little bit of color, here or there, and sort of, I think again, just sort of conveying that I listen to you, I care about you. This is the basics of sales. It's sort of going back to how to win friends and influence people, but it's just show people that you listened, you put in the effort, you care. And I think that level of personalization is the one that, again, that's what good selling looks like. And if you can do that consistently and just actually be there, people notice, people care, people like to be listened to, people like to be, have those sort of small signs of respect for their time. That you sort of hey, I listened, I've gone and I've sort of edited this to sort of make this as relevant as I can for you. Yes, you still want to have the nice product marketing video. You're not going to record a new sort of, yes, you're going to use some of those nice images, designs made, a lot of the copy will be fine. But again, you're sort of trying to how do I sort of make this feel special and unique for that person?
Amen. So well said. The only thing that I can add to it is that you can prove that you listened in one very important step in the sales process, the product demonstration. If you do good discovery and then you throw away all that information that you got in discovery and give them a standard product demo, you should be fired. That is horrible sales practice. You should learn what they care about in that discovery call and use that in your product demonstration to prove that your solution is tailor fit for their issues and sell to those. That doesn't mean you can't sell the other features of your product so that you can get them excited about future steps. It's a crawl, walk, run type of progression, other things like that. But guess what? If you're not solving their core problem, or if you're giving them some standard demo that doesn't touch on the issue that they talked about for 30 minutes in discovery until the very end of the demonstration, you've missed your opportunity and you've lost them. And that's what loses deals. Honestly, it's if you do good discovery, or if you do any discovery and then throw that information away, it's worthless. So listen to them and come back and tailor something specific to them. Make them feel like they were heard.
Boom, Kyle, well said. So thank you, all three. I have nothing to add to that, but we all agree, obviously, on you got to make your buyer feel heard, and you got to personalize stuff just for them. So let's move on to sin number 5. So we already kind of alluded to this in some of the other sins, but not acknowledging other stakeholders and deal influencers. And there is a stat from Gartner that on average, 7 people are involved in the buying decision. So I'm just going to ask you, the audience, right now. I have no poll for this. I just want you to chat in your answer. But what is the most number, or the highest number of people that you've had on a deal at any time? So just chat in your response. Is it 7? Is it 5, 3? Tell us how many of you had. Hopefully it's not like 15 or 20, but we want to know. So please chat in your response. Mia says sometimes 10. Typically no more than 3. We get entire school boards. Wow, my condolences. Up to 4 or 5, 6, 3, 5 to 7 is the range. On average 8. I'm lucky, usually just 2. Okay, good. Generally around 3 to 5. Good. Anybody else? Yeah, up to 10. Wow, depending on the project. 12. LaDon. Wow, that's a lot. 10 plus, usually 3 to 4. Okay, from Clifford. Good. Anybody else want to tell us how many?
I've got one, Sarah. Back in the day,
Okay.
when I was a very, very junior sales rep at Google, I walked into this meeting with a publisher, and I thought I was meeting with one person. There was 11 people sitting around the boardroom table, and I was informed by the CEO of the publisher which I already knew, obviously, but he was like, that we're currently in a lawsuit suing Google about, da da da. And I was like, great, this is going to be an awesome hour of my time. Anyway, fun times for 20-something Mark.
Yeah, I saw a stat too that 10% of the time a CFO will sit in on a sales call uninvited and unannounced. So it goes back to your stat, Kyle, and what you were talking about, quantification and always being ready to talk a CFO's language. But it's very difficult when you don't know that they're going to be there. So tell us some other tricks that you all have had in your career, about planning for stakeholders and deal influencers, and some best practices there.
So I've got a question here. I think when do you two think about the right time to, so there's a zone where you want to understand their buying process, and you want to understand, who else is involved in this deal. And sometimes, I think on discovery and early calls, if you see a little thread, sometimes there'll be a little comment and they'll be like, oh, so-and-so, like, oh, who's so-and-so? Like, oh, actually, that's interesting. Tell me more about this sort of thing. And sometimes there's a nice way you can slide into that. But if you're not presented with a sort of a normal, clean opportunity to sort of ask about that, when do you think the right time is to start being like, who is involved in making this decision to buy here? And what does that process look like? Are you going to send me an Excel spreadsheet with 30 questions on it? Are you going to is it just going to be like the CEO has a vibe? How does this sort of roll? And I think that, again, there are moments I'm always on the lookout personally as a seller for those little thread that I can pull on. But if it's not there, when is the stage that you would structurally put into a sales process, be like, hey, if you haven't done it by here, actually, that's a sort of a black mark against the deal.
I'll take this one very quickly. If we were talking about not sales communication sins, if we were just talking about sales process sins, one of those sins would be not having a mutual action plan. So I'll talk about mutual action plan in a second. I've been lucky enough to work with a great sales leader named Colby Hennard at a couple of organizations in the past. And he says that as soon as you're done with discovery and you've got a good quantified problem, the sales rep's job is to talk about process and timeline. And you can open it up and say, hey, what's your process for getting things done now that we've got this identified problem that we want to solve together? And that opens it up to everything. That's how you build your mutual action plan, actually. But that should get all of the stakeholders that are involved in this and you just keep asking questions about, how they get things done on their end. Yes, you've got your sales process that you want to run, but guess what? You can't just implement that on a customer and say, this is how we're going to do it. That won't work. You want to get them talking about how they make decisions and how they get things done. And I think you can do that right after the discovery call. You probably don't want to do it on the discovery call, but
Yeah.
you definitely want to talk about like, hey, how many different constituencies are going to be involved in this decision, and identify the process for the rest of the timeline.
If not done by a second call, you think trending towards too late?
I think so. Otherwise, how do you know what you're working towards?
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah.
I would say like a discovery call is a good way to get people who are interested to see a peek, like to be on the demo, right? And you don't necessarily have to take them through the buyer process. Then right after you show them a demo, it's a good time to also understand the full buying committee. And it's hard, but it's a frustrating thing. But you just know that when you start having additional members to them, you may have to take each individual member back through kind of the sales process. Like it's very common if you're talking to a manager, it needs a director or VP level, that you may have to resell to them. If you really think that your champion is going to go out and sell your solution correctly, their personal pain problems may be different than what leadership cares about. And so the best thing you can do is get yourself a seat in that room and get to those decision makers and learn what they really care about and make your best case that way.
And if you do get the opportunity, because oftentimes sales reps, let's be honest, we don't get the opportunity to go talk to the CFO, be prepared to speak their language. Be prepared to say that you listened and that you know what they care about and that you're delivering a custom solution to them.
Kyle, we have John asking, what did you say? A mutual
action plan. We should create another webinar just for mutual action plans. Just kidding. Mutual action plan. The key word there is mutual. It needs to be owned by you and the customer, and that you guys are both putting in steps throughout the process. It can't just be all one-sided where you say, this is what I heard you say you're going to do. Boop, 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 boop. You need to do things on the vendor side as well as them on the buying side. And what truly makes it mutual is that it's a shared document that is agreed upon by both parties, and that is a living, breathing document. And if you miss a milestone or a timeline, that you change it and that you both agree to the new timeline going forward.
And I think so this is one of those areas so when you're doing like very large deals, this is sort of the norm, right? Like again, like in Google days, working on stuff that might end up being worth whatever tens of millions of dollars, the professionals on both sides are expecting this, that they want to work on it in a sort of structure where you are talking through like, hey, how are we going to achieve this? Because for them, it's very, very meaningful to their career for this like partnership or deal or whatever else to like go through and be done correctly. And I think the funny thing is like, there's a bit of, as you get down to like smaller, very fast moving, like, SaaS deals again, like, on Qwilr's side, there might be ones where, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 a year, you're not putting together like a 3-page like doc, sort of sitting on that side. But the practice is still like very valuable. And so you can still have even just an email around like, hey, I'm going to be, we discussed this, I'm going to be doing, A, B, and C, and then they sort of confirm over email and you sort of can move back and forth. There again, like there's a level of like, frankly, like reciprocity that comes into a deal process where it's like, hey, I'm going to go and do these things and on the, and making it, explicit, we're going to agree that I'm going to do this, then you're going to do this. And then you sort of start to like really build a working relationship, build trust. And they start to get a vibe of like, oh, this company is professional, they're diligent, they do their work, like all that sort of stuff, which again, like helps you lean towards the deal getting done. But there is, I would say though, like Kyle, like it's like that level of effort is like very easy when it's $1 million on the line, and when it's $1,000 on the line, it's like there's a sort of, and I do think that how you flex up and down to that, depending on the deal type, is sort of there's some nuance there.
And the last thing I would add, go ahead, Kyle.
Just a quick response, and then I'll let you respond, Mike, which is my cheeky answer to that generally when a sales rep pushes back and says, I don't want to do a mutual action plan. I said, is this deal important enough? Are you going to make or break your forecast as a result of this?
Yeah.
So like it can be simpler or more complex based on the size of the deal and the complexity of the deal. But I actually think it's just really good business practice for all those who answered confidently. generally between 3 to 5. Well, how do you know if it's 3 or how do you know if it's 5 for this particular deal? How do you know how long their legal process takes? Is it outsourced legal? Do they have in-house legal? Like all these things you can find out when you build this mutual action plan and ask about all the steps in the process. And again, just like with discovery, if you ask about their process and don't document it somewhere for yourself that you remember it, then you're asking for no reason, right? Like use that information so that you can actually work together in a process to try to close this deal. And your forecast accuracy will go up, and your deal management, your control of your deals will go up. It's just, I found it to be such a good thing for managing a sales cycle.
Good.
The little thing I'd
Okay.
add here is like if you sell software or technology, your silent killer a lot of times is operations on their end. And so like it really good to go into map your account, make sure you know the technical players who are in the buying process. And then separately, those people are a little bit different. You better talk a lot about the post-sale. The implementation better be smooth. They better be reliable, and it better be secure. Those are the things that they really care about. It's a whole different conversation a lot of times from your end buyer. So make sure you're mapping your accounts, you're proactively asking about any operations, because those are the silent deal killers that you almost never hear from until it's too late. And then you're like, oh, ops actually killed this deal.
Yeah.
You know, Mike, you mentioned silent deal killers, and it kind of leads into our last sin. So I want to go ahead and get to that one because we are running a little tight on time as well. But our last sin, probably a lot of discussion here, but negotiating over email. And, you know, Gong has a wonderful stat that win rates dramatically drop when negotiations begin. And negotiations can be very, very subtle, like, oh, I need net 60 instead of net 30. It's not necessarily about money. But as soon as those negotiations begin, Gong shows that win rates drop. So I want to open it up to the panel now. Obviously, a very big one. What do you do when somebody tries to negotiate via email? What are some ways to curb that? How do you advise people or your team when this happens?
I can start here. I'll tell you, as a career salesperson, I've been on one end of the negotiating spectrum. As soon as I turned into VP of sales and was making technology decisions, I want to negotiate over email because you have the advantage of just calling your shot. It's like, here's what I need, go do it for me. But when you're negotiating live or on the phone or over a Zoom call like this, you have the advantage of seeing their reaction and being able to get to a lot more rich communication in the moment. It's very bland over email, right? It's all kind of black and white. There's no nuance to it. The other thing that I'll say, and I'll turn it over because I know we're short on time, is never give anything without something equal or greater in return, right? If they want net 60, get something in return for that. Get a commitment that they're going to sign by a specific date. Get a commitment to know who is going to sign if you don't know that. Get something back. Don't just give unilateral concessions. And that's hard to do over email.
Yeah. So I think, first of all, +1 to that, and like, it can sound like a small thing to give away 1 or 2 things early on in the process. And you feel like, oh, okay, I'm sort of, you know, I'm building trust, or I don't know, whatever. It's actually setting a tone that they can ask and you will give back without any pushback. And I think as those asks will tend towards getting bigger and more complicated and harder, and actually can be real deal killers. So like, even if they are asking for like something as small as being like, you know, our standards are 30 and we want 45, like, oh, it's only 15 more days. It's not going to break the company. Be like, no, but it's like, okay, well, in doing that, well, okay, I can work for that. But, you know, you're sort of, how do I get some degree of reciprocity here and sort of make it clear that there are, as we negotiate, there are going to be some give and take. I think, look, there's a hierarchy of like quality of communication, and like, being in the same room with someone is like #1 by far, caveat, you know, the world we live in today. You know, Zoom is the next best, and then it goes like telephone, like, but there's a very big drop between like phone to like text-based communication. And that drop is, again, it's because like, there's no nuance, there's no feedback, there's no like, it's very hard to get tone and vibe over email. It's hard for you to convey with a look or a sort of bodily position that like, oh, you're really screwing me here on this deal. Like we built all this nice rapport. I would really like for you to like not destroy me and have to go back to my boss and whatever else, and all of those little things that you can do. And I think that, and yeah, I think the other part of it is also, it's so much slower. Like they might just be like, I'm gonna, there are people out there who like, I'm like this sometimes. Like I just look at my email, for 2 or 3 windows a day and I clear through that thing there. And if you just don't get cleared through in that time, it might be a 24-hour cycle, each sort of email cycle. And so like, as we're sort of going back and forth versus being like a 15-minute to half an hour phone call, we can just like go back and forth. Okay, get to a lot of clarity. Okay, the final things we need to sort out are A and B. And then like, sometimes that last little bit can be done over email but it's like really the core negotiation happens on that side. And as Mike said earlier, like time kills deals. Like TikTok, you are trending towards death.
If you think about it, we scan our emails. We don't read them. We don't read to consume. We're picking things out. And so as much as you can add what you think is perceived bullet points on your value of your product, someone's going to see that direct number and they're going to look at your competitor, look at that number. And that's how they are going to reference the two companies. When you can describe the value you go over and you recap what their pain points were, how that solution solves for that, how it's still value-based pricing, even though you may be a little bit more expensive than a competitor, you can couch that more. The one thing I would say as a caveat is once you kind of started those negotiation process, you're pretty deep on the cycle. If you built a good rapport, it is okay to ask for their cell phone number. And at those very late stages, like end of quarter, and you're going back and forth and you need to get it done quickly, text is a good medium after you've already established that value and you spoke about the pricing over like one-on-one communication. Then it's okay to go to some medium like SMS to get the deal done faster.
Huge caveat, you must have asked for their phone number. Yes,
True.
we all know you can use tools today to get various people's phone number. I have received texts from people being like, hello, like, da, da, da. I'm like, oh, I'm never working with you. Like if you are like, if you're asking for it, that's completely fine. If you're like just randomly texting me, that's sort of, just, I would be careful on that side.
One other clarification, just quickly, I know we're at time. It doesn't mean that you can't give them something. I was pretty hard in saying, don't ever give unilateral concessions. Don't ever give unilateral concessions, but it doesn't have to be something of equal monetary value, right? If you don't know who the signer is, maybe that's valuable to them and that's easy for them to give to you. Get something like that in return, right? It doesn't, you don't have to say, well, I'm going to reduce your discount then if you want net 60 days. It's like, that's not what I mean by that.
Yeah. Good. Okay, good discussion there. It's audience participation time again. You've heard all of the 6 sins, but now, it's not enough to just hear stuff. We want you to put it into action. So again, no judgment here, but we want to know, where do you want to improve, whether for yourself or for your team? Is it you want to talk less about your brand? You want to do better with booking future meetings and discovery? You want to quantify the value of your solution? Maybe you want to do more with customizing sales materials. Maybe you want to work more on identifying the stakeholders and influencers, or maybe you need to work on handling negotiations. But just take a moment. This is just personal accountability. You heard it. Where do you want to now put something into action? So, and then, okay, so we have Keith typing in ROI communication. That's great. That's great. Just another 2 seconds here on voting. So 3, 2, 1. Okay, let me share the results. So 23% said talking less about my brand. Same thing, 23% on booking future meetings and discovery. Good. 68% quantifying the value of my solution. That's good. Very good. Kyle's giving you the thumbs up. 32% customizing sales materials. Kudos to you. And 27% identifying stakeholders and influencers, and 36% handling negotiations. That's excellent. Comments from our panelists on the results.
I think there's a nice mix there. I'm glad. Look, I think that the truth is that, I think that life in sales is always trying to sort of like, you're never done. Like you're always trying to optimize and improve and get better at different parts of it. And I think it's sort of understanding, where the bottleneck is right now and sort of putting some real effort into that, and then like cycling through different areas. And I think, if you're coaching, especially if you're coaching teams and managing teams, it is always a bit of a game of not spending too long in one area and keeping it fresh and keeping things moving. But I think mean, I think if we can all move towards a quantified world, Kyle, we'll all be in a better space. So
Great.
Make me
Great.
sound like a bean counter or something like that, quantifying everything. Look, I've been doing this for 20 years. I've been in sales my entire professional career. I would say I want to improve on all 6 of those things as well. There's no end game to this, right? Just because I'm here being really adamant about certain things doesn't mean I'm perfect at them. And so everybody has room to improve upon these things. Good for you for joining the webinar and listening to our perspectives. Again, these are just our perspectives from a bunch of people who've been doing this for a little while, but there are many different types of sale out there. And so one way is not good for everybody.
Yeah, so we are out of time, but I do want to take a moment again to thank our panelists. So we heard from Mike from Dooley, Mark from Qwilr, and Kyle from Mixmax. Thank you very much. I do want to let everyone know we do these webinars fairly regularly, and we have one coming up in March, How to Lead Sales Conversations That Win. So if you would like to pre-register for that, we do have that on your exit survey. Just check that little box and I will make sure that you get signed up and you get information about that one. But again, I want to thank our panelists, but also thank all of you for spending time with us today. And if you would like information from any of the companies you heard about, go ahead and check one of those boxes. Otherwise, we will let you get back to your day, and we wish you all the sales success and a wonderful quarter. So thank you very much.